All right, guys, welcome back to another podcast. This is episode number 24.
Yeah.
I think it might be 24. And I'm joined by my favourite friend, Craig Seaton. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm really good. I remember you had this on last time. What is it? What kind of incense stick is that?
Oh, Nag Champa. Classic. It's a classic.
It's gassing us out, so if we start coughing, it's not because of Corona, it's because we're getting gassed out by incense stick. It's quite interesting, incense sticks, because when I was young, it's quite embarrassing to smell like an incense stick. Going into school smelling like sandalwood. Yeah, or something that's very Indian in the fragrance, or rose. But yeah, everyone's using it these days.
Yeah, they're great, man. I used to have friends would come round and they'll do bits of meditations. In fact, a mate of mine, James, when I used to live on Church Street, another apartment block there, this guy had moved in, never seen him before, and I was just in the lift. And he'd got in the lift and he went, "Is that incense?" I was like, "Yeah." He went, "Oh, it's lovely. Like, went you practice meditation?" I was like, "Yeah." And from there we just became really good mates, like from that conversation, because he smelt the incense on my clothes, and people who'd come around I was actually him and his missus, be like, "How do you always get your house to smell like incense?" And you just either have it on or you just leave a stick in the holder, and it seems to just perfume the house with the scent anyway. So there's a little tip: you want the place to smell nice, just leave an unlit incense stick in. What
was the thing that you used in breathwork? The little tiny wick, the piece of wood that smells so good.
Oh yeah.
So not the sage, but the other thing.
I can't remember the name of that. Scott uses that a lot as well.
It's Leo who brings it in.
Yes. Yeah,
but
I can't remember the name
of it. It smells gorgeous, doesn't it?
It is nice. It puts me off a little bit though. When I did CONVO, cleansing ceremony, they use that to light it. And then anytime I go back into that smell, it's associated with like, I remember being sick and going through a pretty hardcore time with that stuff in the sweat. So that smell links that to that for me. So I'll only use it sparingly now.
It's interesting because smell is a great... I know we think about thought and sight and looking at maybe a candle for when you're meditating to help you get into a meditative state. But smell is a very interesting one, because I feel like out of all of the senses, if you smell something that's nice or it smells a bit funky, it always brings back memories to the last time you had that smell. So we talk about being nostalgic about songs and listening to music that we have memories attached to. Smell is a very interesting one. Like I feel like smell is the one that the memory never fully disappears. Like if you haven't smelled something for a long period of time and then you bring that smell back, like for me, like the thing that we're talking about that we use at breathwork, I always remember that you end the ceremony with burning the sage. So when we're doing the breathwork classes, I know straight away that that's the trigger where you're coming out. You're getting plugged back into the matrix, if you want to call it. But yeah, I go through this amazing journey, and it's a very subtle introduction, because the sage doesn't hit you straight away. It's a very subtle smell. The more you burn it, the more obviously it smells, but it's a very subtle smell, so it brings you back like those modern day alarm clocks, the sunrise ones that they have the sounds of the birds and everything. So yeah, it's a very interesting experience. I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you smell something and it instantly makes you go into like a meditative state.
Perhaps not meditative, or San Paulo, that's what that wood's called. I think the smells definitely help with meditation, why you've got specific incense for that, right? Aren't they? To help create the environment, why certain music works as well, and you link those things together and you create the neural links to go, if I'm in that environment, all of this is working together to pull you into that state. So it's great tools to use if you use them correctly. And that can also be aware of the overuse of things too. You know, if you do those things every day, or you allow what's a ritual just to become standard, it loses that pull on it. Linking back to that song, you know, you hear a song and then you overplay it because it's great and you smash it, and then it doesn't have the emotive pull it has anymore. So it's to use them sparingly, or for the correct feeling that you want to cultivate, and not milking the cow, you know, until there's nothing left, because then it loses its magic and its power.
Yeah, I think I do the opposite. I think I milk it so it gets to that stage. I like the initial nostalgia and amazing feeling. So I'm listening to Janavi Harrison, who's the Hare Krishna ISKCON singer. Beautiful voice. The ginger lady, I don't know if I've shown you.
No, I don't think so.
Beautiful voice. And I remember listening to this song a while ago, and I had it on my playlist, so I played it again. And I remember meditating yesterday or the day before, and it was just so profound. Like her voice was just making me have goosebumps. And the song that she was singing has such deep meaning attached to it. But I get to a stage where I milk it so much so then the song doesn't become, you don't have an attachment to the song in that way. And then you have a purer way of meditating because now you have no attachment to the song or the lyrics. So you have a much purer attachment to the meditation. So it's also maybe doing it in that way as well. So exhausting something out, like we said before, you exhaust something out so much that it no longer, you don't have that attachment or that lingering sensation of being attached to the song. So maybe that's another form of meditation or another form of kind of getting yourself into that meditative state, is to exhaust it to the point where you no longer feel attachment towards it. Maybe that's also with sounds. So, you know, when you surround yourself in an environment where you've got the Tibetan bowls, it can get very trance-like in that environment. You get caught up in a trance because of the sound and the echoes of the bowls and the vibrations and stuff. But it can get to a point where now that sound doesn't seem to resonate with you. That's why a lot of the people that are sound healers tend to change the size of their bowl depending on which practice they're doing. So one week they might have a smaller bowl, the next week they'll have a larger bowl. So then that way you're always changing. So you always have some sort of feeling whenever you attend those classes. So I found that part very interesting as well, where even like basic resonant sounds we can get so used to the point where you no longer hear them in the purest sense as you did when you first started listening to them. So I don't know if you've had any experiences with Tibetan singing bowls.
I love them, man. Singing bowls.
You've got one here, haven't you?
Yeah, I've got a little one over there. Or the big gongs. They're great. Been to quite a few gong baths and they're just so nice and they can take you to some deep places. They will just carry you there. Talking to a gong player and instructor, and he was saying that it doesn't matter what you're doing or where you are, if you fall asleep or you're snoring, whatever's happening, that gong will it will always overpower your thoughts where you are if it's played correctly. And they just sound so deep, don't they, with the bass of them and what they do for you, and combining that with yoga, with breathwork or with meditation, incredible. And this is sound, what another vibration that's going on and the effects it can have on our mind and our state of consciousness. They're not to be underestimated, and to use them for specific meanings, I think really brings a lot forward for us. It's a tool that we can use to reach these other states of mind and where we want to take ourselves or what we want to experience. Apply the correct tools for it. Similar to the emphigens, to the psychedelics, is again, people can use recreational drugs if they want, but you'll be missing out on what it's actually, dare I say, what it's supposed to be doing for is to wake you up or to take you to a new state of consciousness. Sound can do that as well, the senses can do that, but it's not being tied to the senses, it's using them as the tool. Yeah, it's almost you're providing an object or something there that overpowers that sense. So the sense of sound in this case, it overpowers it and it brings it to a level which is either higher or super low, which is very grounded and chilled, or super energetic. And then once you have that, like when you play your trance music in some of the breathwork classes, it gets you to a state where now you kind of come out of your mind. You're forced to come out of your mind because the sound is so distracting or so powerful that it brings you out of your mind, so which also transfers you to a completely different state of even thinking, not just continuously chatting to yourself. It brings you out of that element. And I think they use that as a torture device as well. Loud sounds are very what's the other one, the dropping the water on the forehead, just so it creates a sense of discomfort. But I don't know, I feel as though in those kind of environments I wouldn't necessarily do that badly. Maybe I would last a little longer than most people at the start, and maybe I go crazy afterwards in my own way. But yeah, I found those torture devices, I think we mentioned it before, and maybe at the start of the podcast, or we never said it live whilst the podcast was going on, but I did mention the white room torture, where they have a completely white room and you're supposed to just kind of sit in that white room, and it drives certain people insane. But I think that room, there are two types of blindness that people experience: the blindness of darkness, the blindness of just pure light. So if you have something that's super bright, so anyone that knows anything about photography, when things that are blown out or overexposed, you lose a detail, and you start losing what you depict in the image or what you think reality is. So if you do the opposite, which is not eternal darkness, which is what we practice every day when we sleep or when we meditate, we try and do it in an environment where we don't have much light going on. But if you do the opposite, where you have so much light, so you have so much stimulus for your eye, for your the sensory
that's attached to the eye behind you, then that is a form of, of a state in its own right. So yeah, I'd be interested in doing something like that as well, which is something in an environment that's just so bright as well. Like if you think about nightclubs back in the days where they had the strobe lights, I was never good at environments where strobe lights were there, because I felt things just kind of slow down, and it would really mess me up on the inside. Just never really liked it. But yeah, it's that same experience where creating certain lights or flashing sensations brings a different level of consciousness to the mind. Maybe it kind of shifts you to a different consciousness, or it slows it down.
They have light machines. Don't know if you've ever used them. They use them for dreaming states, self-astral projection, but also just for hallucinogenic effects. My friend used to own one. There's different grades of them. You can get like home versions, or you can get really expensive ones, and it's just a load of different lights. And you stay underneath, you close your eyes, so you'd like lie down, you'd lie down under it, and the similar to like a tripod, and you're lying under this machine, and it would just flash loads of different patterns, and you could program what sort of pattern you want in for it to release, like growth hormone or sleep or rest, or change your brainwaves to gamma states just via the lights. It's really interesting, and it can get very trippy as well. So yeah, lights definitely used in patterns. Even if you've got what's those light bulbs, LED light bulbs, they're really bad for you because they cut off. They're on and off, and it's really bad to have that consistently. It's like why we have blue filters on the phone, or you can get blue filter glasses. Yeah, LEDs are terrible. So bulb wise, you always want halogen bulbs.
The old school
ones, yeah, and they I think they do last longer. It was meant to be light bulbs that they invented that would almost never go out. You'd only need to ever buy one, but as time goes on, we realise, or the people in charge realise, that's not going to make money, so they make them with issues, or they only last for a certain amount of time, a certain amount of hours, when it doesn't have to be the case. There's actually something signed by these different developers of light bulbs that they were all going to manufacture a certain kind, so as not to compete with each other, where somebody brings out the bulb that nobody needs to buy again. Madness. Commercialism for you, isn't it?
Yeah, we can apply that principle to like how people are educated as well, to think a certain way, like we were saying before the podcast, to always use the intellect and never really fully investigate what the intelligence is, or even understand that there is a high intelligence. So the intellect that we use is to decipher the world, or to understand the world through logic. And if you take away that, most people would feel very ungrounded in that environment, because you take away the reality of what they perceive as reality, and you throw them into something that's quite illogical and it doesn't make sense. Some people's brains just can't comprehend it. Like, some people just need to understand the world from how they see the world. And it's interesting because Sadhguru was mentioning this the other day, and I was saying it before the podcast. Like, he compares intellect to a knife or a scalpel, where it's there to cut through reality. So it's there to isolate reality and to almost what was the word I was saying? It's the discriminate reality. So then that way you can understand it based on our five senses and then logic as well. So if we go back to the example of dissecting a frog, you did that when you were doing biology in A-level or in high school. So you dissect it to understand how the biology of the frog functions. But by doing that, you destroy the essence of what you were trying to figure out. So you isolate it, and we only understand it in the aspect of dissecting it. We don't understand the other aspects. We've cut off ourselves from other aspects. So in order for us to understand the other aspects, so not just the biological or the physiological, but to understand the neurological aspect, we have to dissect it in a different way. So each time we do it, we kind of destroy the essence of the creature or whatever it is. So in this example, we have to kill the life to dissect it. So you destroy the essence. Whereas when you take psychedelics or you do breath work and you see reality in a completely different light, that is the illogical part. It's the part where you can't explain. So when you can't explain something, then for a lot of people, that now becomes maybe, I think Joe Rogan keeps saying that all that is maybe it's just all you're hallucinating, or it's just an experience for yourself. But maybe that's what reality is. Maybe that's what real reality is, which is not being able to understand everything, whereas the reality that we're experiencing through our five senses, through understanding it through logic. It's based on how we perceive the world and how we want to perceive the world. But taking the cap off, taking psychedelics or breathwork or meditation, deep meditation, you really get to investigate life in its truest form. So he says you should always use intellect as a sword in a sheath. When you don't need to use it, which is most occasions, put it back in the sheath. Don't pull it out, because they say that a sword that's continually out of its sheath and used will always become blunt. But to keep it sharp all the time is to always keep it in the sheath and only use it when appropriate. So it's applying that logic to the way we perceive the world, and to understand that it's okay to experiment in certain realms. So for example, listening to Joe Rogan talking to David Blaine, and him talking about how he learned to hold his breath for 20 minutes. He said you have to go beyond that barrier where panic sets in when you're holding your breath. You know, that everyone experiences that feeling when you're holding your breath underwater, where we used to understand it as CO2 levels increasing, but it isn't. It's a different phenomenon. So it's not the deprivation of oxygen, it's the increase of CO2, and you want to expel it, but it's going beyond that boundary, because the body wants to go into that mode where it conserves the blood and brings it to one certain area, which is the vital organs, the brain and the heart, and it gets rid of the blood in the other areas for a survival mechanism. And the experience you go through is blackout. So the Navy do this as a training protocol in case they're in those situations where, you know, the submarine is just destroyed and they have to kind of escape and get to the surface of the water. So they have to learn this process of not panicking when they black out. And it's actually through the process of blacking out that the body is able to survive, just like a coma. The body is able to preserve itself. The brain and the intelligence is able to preserve itself in this completely different realm. And a lot of people that go through blackout, and Joe Rogan explains it through people that get knocked out or choked out. Knocking out is a traumatic process, because when you come out of it, it's the sensation of being knocked out, which is traumatic for the person. But being choked out is a completely different experience, because you go through this little thing and you black out very slowly, as opposed to being a sudden blackout. You black out very slowly. So when you come out of the experience, a lot of people talk about having a very euphoric experience, like seeing like a party environment or really like bright lights and stuff. So when you come out of it, you go through this amazing trance experience, and it's exactly the same when you black out in water. You know, you go through this amazing experience, and maybe this is what the whole death experience is like as well. That bridge between what is living and what is dead is that weird area that we really haven't fully come to terms with in modern science. So maybe we need to also look into that realms.
Yeah, who knows what it could be. As we spoke about death before, I always imagine it will be something along those lines that will be so overwhelming that the framework that you have to try and figure it out, it's going to be useless. You know, there's no point in putting the scaffolding of how we see things to be, that it will be that when it occurs, and how we interpret reality now is only based off the past experience. And using the intellect for it is, we were trained to see everything as a problem. Everything needs a solution. Everything's to be worked out. Or how do we make that better? Or how does that make sense? Or how do we understand that? And for those people who've got into spirituality, maybe realise that trying to figure everything out just through the way that we saw things or were raised to, the answers won't be there, or there'll always be another problem. Krishnamurti always says that the problem isn't separate from the person. So if you see a problem, you're part of that because you're seeing the problem, which says so much about the mind that he's looking out, the mind that he's seeing things. It doesn't mean if you see something, it's like, okay, that needs to be sorted. Yeah, there's obvious things, but seeing that thing and knowing it can be done in a different way is not necessarily seen as a problem. It's seen as, this might be a much more useful or efficient way to do something, when we're not looking at it as a problem. Like, how do I get through this? And it's the mind saying, oh, we've got that tool, let's change it to this. And the energy you bring to approach something then will completely change. And just to reiterate that if you see a problem, you're not separate from it. And that can teach us so much if we just spend a little time on that alone, whether you still want to do something to what it is you're looking at, or whether you can actually let it go. And it doesn't trigger you the same way, or you don't think about it the same way anymore when you recognise that the energy that the problem, quotation marks, is from your perception too. And
to comprehend it almost.
Yeah, and it can bring you peace with those things that are around us, or the things that we want to change in people or the world. Maybe it's us just seeing it that way. Maybe that person doesn't have to do it the way I do, or doesn't have to look how I look, or do the things that I do for the world to be great. The things that we want to change are because we've either not made peace with something, or it's different from the way we do it, or it's not our ideals. So that's how we're the problem at the same time.
Yeah, it's interesting how we troubleshoot problems, because if you think about it, the problem doesn't actually exist. It's the fact that based on what you perceive as something being a problem. So for example, if you talk about the problem of lighting up a room, if we didn't know what a bulb was and we wanted to create something that lights up a room, the problem only exists when we create the environment for it to exist. In our minds, in our environment, in our social environment, in everything else, in our psychological environment, the problem only exists. Like when you have a fear or a phobia, the problem only exists because you've created that in you. You've created that environment for the problem to manifest. Now, depending on how you contain it and how it spreads, it's based on what kind of solutions you have to address those problems. So a lot of the problems that we face today, the anxiety and all the suffering that we go through, the mental suffering that we go through, it's because we've created these problems and we haven't fully resolved, maybe not even found a solution, but we haven't gone through the process of troubleshooting these issues through a longer period of time, and we try and do it in one go. So when you hit that melting point and you have to go see a psychiatrist or a psychologist, it's because you haven't addressed it through that long process. So, something like a minor scuffle with your partner, you've had a little falling out, the easier process is to address it there and then and just say, look, this is how it's been, let's talk about it, let's get through it. But what will happen is minor issues like that tend to be put on the shelf, and that usually builds up in the background, whereas other major issues, so you might have forgot to do something or pick someone up, and you've just had a massive falling out. So certain other issues that we tend to kind of categorize these problems. So we have the minor issues that are at the bottom, and then we have the next tier problems, and then we have problems that are greater than that, and then maybe the final step is a breakup or someone has died in that period, and that's a bigger issue that you need to address. So what happens is those problems that have been put on the shelf are kept on the shelf and they never get fully addressed. So it's not necessarily the bigger problems that are the issue that we have, it's the underlying ones that we haven't addressed through that process. And I think that's where we kind of get ourselves stuck in a bit of a phase where we don't address them. And I think it's what you said before this podcast, where I was asking you what you've been up to and stuff, and you said you haven't got many things going at the moment apart from the usual stuff, so you've got more free time at hand to work on these little things. It's those times where you want to where you're forced to take a step back because nothing's going on, and you get to address those little tiny issues or maybe niggles that you're having, and it's when we don't do anything and we just kind of sit there and just we don't kind of focus on those things, and we distract ourselves, is when we start to understand that actually those problems keep coming up again and again and again until they finally start becoming that snowball that gains momentum, and now it's become a huge problem. So when you have multiple medium-sized problems together, those together are sometimes greater than one major problem because you can't focus anymore. Like, we can focus on one thing at a time, but when we have multiple issues going on at the same time, then it becomes a huge problem for us. So yeah, it's addressing it as that, and maybe even addressing it as not a problem, like we said right at the start. So if you see it as a tiny little thing, if you address it straight away, then it's no longer a problem. So it's looking at it in that aspect. And I kind of went off in a tangent there, but yeah,
cleaning as you go, isn't it? It's seeing these things that arise. It's so easy to put little things to the side or not think, I'll do it later, or I'll have to worry about it.
Like shaving. If you keep your beard at that level, you're good all the way through. Whereas for me, I don't shave for like 3 or 4 weeks, and then I have to have a big shave and get rid of everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's preference, isn't it? Because some people work more effectively that way. Right, for shaving, for example, is it'll grow to a certain length, but I just take a blade every 2 days and just do the sides. Like, this bit I won't do all the time. I'll do that every 5 days or whatever it calls for it. But some people really efficient, they like to do it all the time. Perhaps it is efficient, perhaps it isn't. It depends on the personality type. As long as it's being attended to in your way of doing things, there's always another way. We see which way works best with us and the characteristics we have, or the characteristics we want to develop, and do things for that style. I don't know why, it just reminded me of a quote of Jordan Peterson. And it said, never sacrifice the person you could be for the person you are now. And I really like that. I don't know why that came into my mind when we were talking about shaving beards, but to see potential in what you're doing now, but what it could be if you keep moving forward, or you just have a different mindset, or you tweak things. Never to overshoot. Like, if you're doing things that are fine, keep going. I think never conclude, but if something works, it works. I mean, I know that from trying so many different things before, finding something that works, but thinking, oh, it could be better, or it should be better, and then completely derailing the whole process when it was actually working just fine. So you're seeing the efficiency in your life and the effects it's having on you and the life around you, whether this mode works or not. Which is great for discovering yourself and your path and what is right for you as an individual.
Yeah, so we can tie that in with focus, because I was just climbing with a friend before this podcast, and we were just talking about how it's interesting how all these big CEOs, when they make this large amount of money or wealth, they tend to simplify their daily chores so they can focus on the bigger picture, or the things that they really want to focus on. So, like, I think Steve Jobs was famous for saying that he would wear the same color, grey. So then that way, when he woke up, or he would have the same food. And then that way, when you wake up, you're not prioritizing on the very abstract, trivial stuff that you would normally spend a lot of time doing. So if you go out, if you've got 100 pairs of shoes, you have to kind of sit there and think about what shoe to wear. So if you almost streamline the process and get rid of the things that are no longer, making you think about the very trivial stuff, very mundane stuff that you would just you wouldn't really have to think about it. It's not a greater issue if you decide to wear, something yellow or something red today, or it doesn't match. And a lot of people these days have that issue. Like we said about the problem situation, you're creating your own problems in that environment. You're having an argument with your girlfriend or your partner over the way you dress because she wants you to dress a particular way because of the event you're going to. And you're saying, it doesn't matter. I can wear whatever I want. And if the environment doesn't like what I'm wearing, then maybe I don't want to attend it. And obviously you have to kind of figure out a balancing point. If it's a formal wedding, you don't want to rock up in like jeans and maybe like a leather jacket or something. So there's that aspect as well. But if you streamline that process, and I think this is what the daily sadhans that Sadhguru and a lot of the spiritual people talk about, is streamlining that process. So you really churn that process and you figure out, what is it that I want to focus on? So if your priority is breathwork and serving the world, then you would assume that the tiny little trivial things like the matching your socks and trying to find a pair of socks that match, that goes out the window. And then you take it to the next level where now you don't have to focus on that by buying those pair of socks that are the same damn color. So you don't have to worry about those things. So we can really take away a lot of the stresses in our life if we do that, if we streamline tiny things. I'm not telling people to wear the same clothes all the time or the same color all the time, but try and strip it away. Maybe say, okay, I'm going to make sure that, when I'm going out, I've got this set of clothes for that. I've got this set of clothes for that, but also keep it to a certain category. Don't go too flamboyant with the colors, or don't go, Indians are notorious for that. Weddings, my sisters are the worst. Like, they have to kind of, well, actually, no, I'll take that back. My sisters are quite good at that, because what they do is a few days in advance, they'll decide which color to wear and they'll stick to that. Whereas I've seen other people getting changed, my cousins, Jesus, they would pick on the day, and then within like 5 minutes of deciding what to wear, they'll strip it away and wear something else. I'm just like, 5 minutes ago you were saying you wanted to wear that black sari, and now you've just decided that, it doesn't suit your makeup, it doesn't suit the theme, or wait a second, the other girls are wearing this color, so I've got to wear this. It's all this kind of trivial stuff we think about. I'm just like, whoa.
It's a lot, isn't it? It was Steve Jobs and Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg does the same. He just has his big hoodies and his different collection. And Steve Jobs had like his black sweater and his pants, just 7 or 8 copies of the same clothes, just so that was gone. Don't have to worry about what you're wearing. The same stuff does the job. And there's a friend my partner was talking about, the girl that she knows, and she only wears certain clothes. It was like lamb's wool perhaps, and it had to be, when it was washed, it has to be out of the dryer within 10 minutes.
Right.
And it was causing her issues where she had a cleaner and the cleaner had to come and take them out, and if a cleaner couldn't be there, she couldn't put the washing on because it would shrink. And it's like, and my friend said, why don't you just not wear that? Well, not wear lamb's wool. And she's like, well, it's who I am now. And it's like, wow, you've just created massive problems for your life. Like, it's bizarre, isn't it? And there's also attachment to the image. Well, that's who I am. That's what I like to wear. All right. You're creating more problems in your life because these things aren't essential. They're not essential. And I've never really been too fashion conscious, to be honest, so I can't,
we can't really
and t-shirts. So, sometimes maybe a little too relaxed about that stuff. But for me, it's not. It's, just wear what you're comfortable in and present the image that you want to present.
Yeah.
But don't over exaggerate that or give yourself issues about the clothes that you're wearing. And it is bizarre, isn't it? It's mad that we will take on challenges, or the amount of times abs will be getting changed. Like, how's this look? Does it look fine? I'm like, oh, it looks fine. it looks great to me. It's the way you wear what you want, what you feel comfortable in. But maybe it's different for. Well, it must be different for other mindsets. I just don't think it's worth the energy or the struggle to wonder, what should I be wearing? How's it going to go? And when you're doing jobs like us as well, it's easier in the sense we're working in the gym or we're with clients, so it's very simple. It's very easy when you're teaching fitness and movement, because we get used to these clothings anyway, and they're comfortable and they're ideal for doing what we want to do in it. But to have the stress of like, what I forgot to wear tonight, even if I was going out to meet friends, it would just be simple, getting a t-shirt on and some jeans, done.
Yeah, I think that's simple for us, and guys still
maybe for guys in general as well.
Yeah,
it's a lot
for
easier.
women it's quite interesting, because this is why I find the whole psychology part interesting. And Jordan Peterson always talks about this, where the women in the workplace and the clothing that they wear or they're forced to wear and this and that. But it's interesting how, okay, we can say that we want to look good, right? And then we can either draw the line there, but then it goes deeper for some people. And then I think Jordan Peterson, for his first, when he became mainstream, his first sort of challenge was to address that. How do we get people, how do we figure out why people wear such colourful clothing and this and that and always keep changing their clothing based on, we can say it's based on the evolutionary trait, which is to attract a mate. Because obviously animals the males tend to have this very, vibrant colours, and the females tend to be a bit more mute because of, obviously, if you're pregnant and you have a nest, the last thing you want is to look vibrant to a predator so they can spot you out. So we can say there's that evolutionary aspect of you want to attract a mate. But then how do you explain people, once you're settled down, so you've got a girlfriend now, and you've been with her for over a year now, just over a year.
Year and a half, yeah.
So we've got other people that have been with their partners for God knows 5, 6 years, maybe 10 years, 20 years. You've got to that stage where you're okay where you are, you've created a family and you've got kids. So, and then you still decide to wear very flamboyant colours. So how does that tie in with the evolutionary aspect? It's interesting, isn't it?
Well, I think we'd look at where the ego is at for that then. Like, does that person get their value and the self-worth from their image and what they're looking like, and they want to keep a certain level of that going? Maybe they still want to look appealing to the whatever sex they're attracted to. People like to hold on to youth as well and hold on to how they were at a certain point and keep that going. So I think there'll be multiple reasons. But yeah, I mean, it's like people who get into relationships and when they've been together a while and they say, the partner's let themselves go, or the guy gets fat or stops working out, or what, because it's funny to witness that as part of what you're talking about, because it does happen, as opposed to someone being freshly single, or they're constantly single and they've always been in the gym, or watching their figure a little bit more, taking care of himself. So it wants to be done for yourself, doesn't it? That's how you'll always keep that healthy balance. I have a massive yellow hoodie. Abs hates it. She doesn't like it, but I love it, and I just put it on and I just feel so comfortable in it. And it's bright. It's a bright yellow hoodie. Things like that will stick out, I guess, to other people's views. As a point of attraction, I guess that's an option, but also an expression of where you're at and how you're feeling on that day. That also comes in with clothing, and your appearance in general. Like, is the beard bushy and big? Why do we keep it that long? Or grow our hair long, grow our hair short? There's always something within it, whether it's complacency or whether it's by design. Perhaps when you get to the point where you're just not fussed there must be that spot as well where you're just not fussed how it is, because it's arbitrary, doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, which is a very nice place to be. But it's also the importance, the effect you would be having on the environment around you. You know, you can look at somebody who's homeless and their clothes look dirty and their beard and their face and, you know, the demeanour, I suppose, will always give a certain feeling to other people, that they'll be avoidant, or they won't want to help that person as much, or, you know, things like that. And that must be subconsciously programmed into us as well as completely not caring, or the healthy level of, I'm just fine doing what I'm doing and it doesn't need this analysis. Yeah,
that's a very societal thing there, where you've addressed and you've created rules depending on how people dress. So there's that aspect, but I like the other extreme, which is the simplicity of it. So monks wear either white or orange, those two, and then obviously you get the nuanced areas. So some monks wear yellow or the sort of beige sort of colour. Is it beige or maroon? What's that colour called? It is beige, isn't it?
Is it beige?
That's the sort of reddy, dark cherry red colour. So there's that aspect as well. And they wear that as a way to say, first of all, we are separating ourselves from you guys. So it's funny because when I see someone who's wearing that bright orange monk colour, I immediately think, oh, it's a monk. But then it's not. It's the person dressed in that orange colour. You rarely see it, but when you do see it, it catches you slightly off guard.
It's definitely a few in town from the Buddhist centre I've known over the years. You just see me like, he's been, you know, he's from the Buddhist centre or somewhere.
Yeah, it's that distinguishable orange colour that they wear. And most people generally will not wear clothing that has that colour. But even then, it's a very interesting colour, because it shows you that you have given up your attachment to your body. So you wear a very simple colour, either white or the orange, and then you also shave your hair to say that, you know, there's two meanings to it. You've got the meaning that you've given up your previous life, so you've relinquished your previous life and now you've decided to move on to this very simple path. And the second meaning is that simplicity. If you just shave your hair, the opposite is keeping it long. If you just keep it long, then you don't have to worry about continuously shaving it. Like Sadhguru's hair never changes, you know, and he's kept that beard. And this is why wise old people, especially men, not women, but wise men keep their beard long. It's just, it's more of a less hassle thing. And people tend to make like all these kind of laws and stories about it, saying, you know, they do it because it does this for them and it does this and that. Maybe it's true, you know. We talked about it in our head podcast, where, you know, the ends of your hair act like antenna, but you have to allow it to grow for at least about 6 to 8 months for it to create that static charge. So maybe this is why the dogs were coming over to me yesterday. Yeah, we were just saying before the podcast that I was sat with one of my students, who's a good friend of mine from Block, and we were just sat at the canal, and there was just this period of 10 to 15 minutes of these dogs just coming over to me, and they all were tiny dogs and sausage dogs, just coming over to me, stroking my leg or wanting me to pat him. And he was just like, what's going on with you today? And I was like, well, you know, maybe it's a celibacy thing, or maybe it's just the fact that it's the static in the hair or whatever. And you were saying good vibes, like animals and young kids can usually sense that the feeling of good vibes in someone who's trusting. So maybe it's that as well. But it's interesting how that all works. And I get the same comments about my hair. Maybe not as much anymore these days, because Manchester is a small place, and once you've received that comment from someone that you know, you're not likely to hear it again. But people say, you know, you must work on your hair quite a lot and this and that. I'm just like, no, just leave it long. Take care of it, like we said in that hair podcast. Take care of it in the sense that look after the inside of your body, you know, make sure that the mental state is good, the physical state is good as well. So you're giving yourself good nutrition, good food, and plenty of water and good rest as well. And that does most of the job for you. You don't have to work on the exterior if you work on the internal part. And your body will naturally, it will grow with age, and it will have its own quality to it. But those qualities are not desirable these days. To have that, everyone wants wisdom, but they don't want the age attached to the wisdom, do they? But then it works hand in hand. You never get wisdom unless you go through the experience or through the age has its toll on you, and you develop wisdom through it. So it's understanding that aspect of why we have these the sort of so-called attachments towards certain objects. So having a certain garment or garment to define who we are as a person. And again, it comes back to what we've always mentioned in this podcast, is to separate the mind and the body away from who we really are in the essence. Because when a person falls in love with you, yes, maybe they liked you originally because of the way you looked and your hair and the way you dress yourself, but that quickly goes out the window. It doesn't matter who you are as a person. That immediate attraction, especially for women, it goes out the window straight away. It's who you are as a person, and do you actually have a character, or are you just like the rest of the sheep in the street? So, and that's a major thing for a woman, because evolutionary speaking, you're looking for a mate who's suitable for you to have offspring with. So you want to have the right environment, the right person, the right sort of characteristics for a fatherly figure. If you don't have that, then the female will automatically say, no thank you. It doesn't matter how attractive you are physically. They'll just think, no thank you, because that attraction is not just based on the exterior. So why do we prioritize the exterior so much that now that is the only form of attraction, even though everyone knows that's only just the gateway? The rest of it is the deeper essence of attraction.
Yeah, that just really highlights where we're at socially, doesn't it? It's about the instant, like you say, people want the wisdom, but they don't want to go through the process for it, or we want to get to the end and instant, now. That's where we're at with the generation and technology, social media, and everything just being there, food, It's the problem with abundance, isn't it? So when it's all around you and there, you don't care about the process as much. There's a good Sadhguru video the other day, and it was saying that if you want the flowers, you don't think flower, you think manure, dirt, soil, light, sun, water, nourishment. That's
all the dirty stuff almost.
Yeah, everything that has to be there to get you to that point.
Yeah.
Which is the point of, you can tie that into failures and all the bad experiences or traumas that we've been through. They're the fertile ground for wisdom and for understanding on a deeper level, and to create a flower from that. Where you can't just have the flower, that breeds like the bratty attitude, complete ignorance, that we want it all now without putting the right effort into it. Which really, I suppose, a spiritual lifestyle, an authentic spiritual lifestyle, isn't followed for that very reason, because you have to sit down and your mind is very rarely going to be quiet. There has to be the long goal ahead that you love, that you really want, that you're so invigorated to go out and get. A state of mind consciousness, exploring what it is that you actually are, because to me, what's more fascinating than what you are, because we don't even know what we are. We're always placing it on the clothes or the world, or getting that instantly, or doing that, or being seen that way, and it's so irrelevant, so tiny to the fact that you're experiencing life. Like that just does it. There you go, done for me. You are experiencing life. What does that mean? And and how is it that you're experiencing life? What are you experiencing life through? Why do other people experience life differently? Is there an ultimate way to experience life? I'm a part of all of it, so how am I an individual within a net of other individuals, all coming from one thing of consciousness? So it's too juicy and incredible to not want to pursue that. But we don't. We want it instant. We want the answers. We want to know without doing the effort to get it. But you can't know. You won't get those answers, because a lot of the truths that you hear about, or that we follow from gurus or books or teachers, they found their truth because they've done it. It's not the same truth for us. They're trying to guide us and push us somewhere, but they can't give it to you. You have to go and figure it out yourself. It's your own path, your own way of getting there, which is why it's so incredible. And also why so many people won't, or they'll go from guru to guru, or psychedelic to psychedelic, or teaching to teaching without the application of it, without spending a year just doing one style of bhakti yoga or one style of building a certain mindset before it's ready to envelope into something else. That's where the real substance is. It's not, there you go, you've got it now, done, go to bed, take your life, you're finished. It doesn't work that way.
Well, it's interesting you said that. So there's two things I want to go into. The instant gratification thing, so remind me of that. The other thing that you just said at the end made me think of something. So I was telling you before the podcast, I'm watching the sequel to Avatar: The Last Airbender, which is The Legend of Korra. And there's an interesting character called Tenzin, who's the son of Aang, who's the main avatar in the first series. And he says something really deeply profound. He says that, so there's a part of the episode, and hopefully this is not going to spoil anything for anyone, but there's a part of the episode where he has to enter the spiritual realm, and he's seeing his dad, so there's a certain expectation because his father's taught him all these things, and his father was the avatar, so there's a certain level of expectation that he needs to meet, but he can't cross over. he just can't do it physically because he's never experienced it. So he's read about it. He's read about how to get into those meditative states and what he needs to do to get into that environment. So that goes back to the analogy of you learning from a monk or reading from a book and understanding what the process is and what you need to do, but never truly doing it yourself. So in the episode, he's spending the first 15 minutes of the episode like changing environments. So let's meditate in the mountains, or let's meditate in this temple and this and that, or the forest, and he just can't sit still, and all these distractions around him. So he's got his little son playing the bells, the gong bells, and he's telling his son, like, stop playing it with this tempo, like it's got to be nice and slow. And his kid's only like 6 years old, and he's getting agitated because he's been taught that, and there's an expectation either from your guru or from the people you're around or your teacher telling you that you've been chosen from a group of people, or you're the son of, you're a progeny, or you're the son of someone great, and you need to follow that path. You need to be as good as this person. And you put all these pressures on yourself. And I feel like people that hit the spiritual path after living a life of just the materialistic stuff and indulging themselves in the material lifestyle almost feel the pressure of, I've taken this path on, all the people I'm around don't believe in what I'm doing, but they see what I've done, and now I have to live up to expectation. So when I'm talking about meditation or the experiences of yoga or the experiences of breathwork, now I have to come from a reference point of always telling them what the next step is or what the experience is like, but never truly going through the experience. So it's always being more of how do we describe it, a keyboard warrior. Is a good example of today's generation. People can put stuff up and defend certain things and insult people when there's a screen in front of them and a keyboard right next to them, but in person they would never be able to say those things. And this is why, because there's a separation between the two areas that exist. You can almost say that aspect, the keyboard warrior aspect, is the spiritual realm. It's the fact that you've read about it and you're willing to experience it in that area. So we can go a little deeper. You are great, and it's something I was talking to a friend of mine from Block. I don't want to mention her name, so I don't want to embarrass her, but she was saying how she can be spiritual in a spiritual environment. So if you go to a retreat, she feels as though she can be spiritual in that environment. She's watching Wild Wild Country, the Osho one. Yeah. Highly recommended for anyone that wants to experience that aspect and see how that can turn into a negative thing as well. So it's not just a positive thing, a bunch of hippies together, living together. It's great, but then it can also be a dark thing as well, because very dark aspects of human beings are expressed in those environments when you've not fully addressed what the environment is and who you really are. Yeah. It can be expressed in a very dark way. Yeah. So she was just saying, if I was living in that ashrama, that environment, I would be amazing. I'll be very spiritual and I could practice my spirituality. But I said, do you not see the pitfall of that? When you're in that environment, if you can only express those traits in that environment, but then when you go back into the real world and you can't do it, then there's a big issue there. Because what's happening is you are dealing with this environment in the exterior. Again, you're in the outside and not in the inside. The inside of you hasn't changed. You're like a chameleon. You're changing every time you're in the environment that requires you to change your spots, the color of your spots. And that's not a good way of doing it. So it's like that example again of a person running away to become a monk and living in mountains and trying to cultivate himself as a monk. But the single moment he exits the mountain, he's no longer that monk anymore. So it's understanding that aspect of it, that it really is entwined in that. How do you change the inside? Well, the simplest answer is to not focus so much on the outside. But if you're living in the environment that requires you to focus the outside, the greatest form of separation or detachment is to separate the outside and the inside, but to still be involved in the environment that requires you to focus on the outside.
Yeah, I think it's important to know that there are values of doing those things. So for your friend who mentioned that, you can go to the retreat and you feel spiritually uplifted and you're nourishing that aspect of yourself. Or it might be the first time you go to one, you're like, wow, I didn't know I could feel like this. I didn't know there was a community there. But it's knowing as and when those times are required. And it can be something that's just a lovely thing to do. Like meeting up with your friends can be a spiritual thing. If you're tap into, it feels great to be with you and to talk and to be out climbing or whatever. It's like, yeah, you're in something good there. Can you maintain that sort of joy and that feeling or that spiritual awareness going about your everyday life? Because that's probably the ultimate purpose, is to be that energy, be that energy that you're feeling and put the teachings into practice and live them. it's very, very self-aware of your friend to say that and recognise that in yourself, rather than not acknowledging that whatsoever and go, I'm spiritual there, and I'm still like that outside. I just choose not to be, or to be honest with ourselves and know that it could be bloody difficult. But that's where, what are your tracks that you on? What do you value in your life? What is your life about? Something I ask my self-development clients in a series of questions at the start. One of them is, what's the meaning of your life? What is the meaning of life to you, and what is the meaning of your life? And it's amazing how many of us haven't thought about that, how many people haven't actually questioned that. And then you say, what's fulfillment to you? And then why aren't you that fulfilled already? Why isn't that fulfillment there? Because if it was, they wouldn't be asking to do some work with me. That's ultimately what it's about. I've got this blockage in my head, or I see things a certain way, or I don't feel right. Okay, let's look at what that is. And the questions that, if we're sincere about spirituality, which is really the compassion for yourself and the health of yourself and the health of the world, or the understanding of the world, you'll want those answers. You'll want to know them generally for you, not to fit in with a group, not to fit in at the retreats, or not to fit in the mountains in India. Go there for nourishment and understanding, but no, don't think you're there just because you're there, because it's what you take away with it, and it's what you feed. It's part of the fertilizer, it's part of the manure, the soil, the light, the sun. Get it all, so you are the flower that blooms, and it's not been given to outside of you.
So I was just thinking that we have this same pitfall in Hinduism, especially in my sector of Hinduism, where sometimes it's all about for show. So, when I was growing up, we had the mark on our forehead, and I remember growing up, and I stopped doing it because I felt like, I was almost betraying it, because I wasn't living that lifestyle anymore. So I stopped doing it, but then I had monks saying, why have you stopped doing it? And then instead of looking at the deeper aspect why I stopped, it would always be the superficial aspect of, I feel embarrassed by it, in terms of the mark itself, but not embarrassed by the lifestyle, but I feel embarrassed by it. So then the next answer, or the next question would be, they'll say, do you want to start doing it again? Like, the benefits for it. And then my answer would always be, in this environment, the four walls of this temple, it's so easy. I can do it anytime, no problem whatsoever. Especially when you're a young kid, when you're a teenager, and you're faced with what you think now, you have this idea of reality, and then you face what reality really is, and how brutal the world can be. When you're out there and you face it, it's difficult. And I said, I'd rather be true to myself and practice whatever I'm practicing on the inside is also on the outside. So if I don't feel like I'm really feeling the spiritual part of me anymore, yes, I might have to let go of it. It might take this lifetime, or it might take another lifetime for me to come back into it, but I'd rather do that than continue with the mark on my forehead, almost as though everything is okay. And I think this is what the pitfall is. So I've used that analogy in the sense of what I experience in my sector, but this is something everyone experiences to some degree. So let's say in the work environment, you're a lawyer or you're an accountant, and you've done your stuff, you're good at your job, you've made your money, but then it hasn't still brought you satisfaction. Originally, like going back to what you said about the clients, so one of your questions might have been, okay, so what do you think the meaning of life is for you? And my answer is, well, I just want to make money. And I say, okay, how's that serving you? Well, I've made money, so why are you coming to me? Why do you feel unhappy? I don't know. So it's understanding those issues straight away, troubleshooting those issues and addressing them and saying there is an issue there. If what I feel as though the meaning of life is for me is to make money, and that's not bringing me joy, surely my meaning of life has to change, or maybe I need to figure out what my real meaning of life is. Because if that was my real meaning for life, then I would be happy. That would be bringing me joy, but it isn't. So what is the next thing? Well, serving other people, try and bring other people up. Well, no, that's kind of hard. I don't want to do that. I'm happy being selfish. Well, again, that selfishness, is that giving you joy? No. So, we come back to those issues. It's that diagram where you look at I can't remember what it's called, but you have certain shapes, and then you come back to it, and then it asks you that question, and it gives you, if you say no to it, it gives you a different path. So it's going back to that same diagram, and asking those questions again. And it's not it's not a one thing where you just ask that question once, and then as soon as you find the answer to that question, it brings you joy, because that joy is always temporary, because you have to keep asking those questions again. What is the pitfall? And I remember the last podcast we did, I showed you a video of that 23-year-old monk, and how you look at him, and it's just a 9-minute video, and it's just joy is blooming from his face. You can just see it. He's 123 years old, and he just looks as though he's no older than about 60, 65. He's just so mobile, and the way he speaks, how simple his life is. And we always say, and it's quite, it's a cliche to say the simplest things in life are the most joyful. And it's true. Like, if you simplify your life, you take away all of the issues that you go through. So if you're living in a massive house, downgrade, or if you've got 10 cars and you're not going to use those other cars, downgrade. Just get rid of all the stuff that are those tiny little obstacles that we mentioned previously, which is, you don't think that they're obstacles right now. You just see them as just tiny little mundane things that you wouldn't think twice about. But you look at the grander scheme of things and you realize that actually those things are an obstacle. Now I'm having to pay insurance on all of those cars. Now I'm having to make sure that I'm maintaining or cleaning 10 rooms as opposed to just cleaning one or two rooms that I've already got. So it's those little tiny things that are adding up. So then you've got the larger problems, like your business might not be doing well, or you're hating your job even though you're making money. You're not having to address those larger things. You've got those larger things to address, but you've got the tiny little things that are already setting you down anyway. So you come back to your house and you feel empty because those 10 rooms are empty. So it's that aspect of life that we're not really thinking about. But the analogy of the mark on the forehead, that was, for me, that was the thing that really hit for me. I'm like, I'm not feeling joyful in what I'm participating in. Maybe I needed to go back to my spiritual life, because that's the only thing you have. That's the only path you have in this life, is your own spiritual life. Because once you die, that's it. No one remembers you for what you did, So it's down to what the meaning of life is for you. I'm going back to what I was going to say before, which is the instant gratification. Maybe this is what we need. This is the exact environment we need to go through this cycle of continuously gratifying ourselves instantly, to the point where now we become numb to it and say, that isn't the answer. So everything that we see today, everything is all about instant gratification. Social media dating, all the dating apps, the fact that when someone wants something from someone, so from work, you might want a certain result from one of your employees, or you might want something from your boss, and he's not giving it to you, but then he gives it to you in instantaneously, and you've got that result straight away. But then you realize that actually I've got the result what I wanted, but it isn't adding towards the end goal. So again, it's having those sort of expectations, not just for yourself, but putting those expectations on other people, reining those in as well, and thinking that they're going to give you those instant results straight away. So if I'm feeling depressed right now, I go find myself a dog or find myself a girlfriend, and then she will resolve all those issues. No, it's going back to yourself again.
Yeah, I think it also shows actually in instant gratification that it's endless. If we're in that stream, as soon as the next issue comes, or as soon as the next thing that you want's there, it'll be straight to the instant gratification rather than the self-development of why am I craving that thing? Why do I want that response so quickly? Why do I have to have that entertainment right now? Because we're trying to pull away from something. And I think if we don't realise that quick enough, the instant gratification becomes its own thing that it gets used to itself. So we've forgot the initial reasons why we were doing it. It's like, I'm just used to having everything. But then there's another massive issue that's been built, because that's going to be so much harder to come out of from that. Even with WhatsApp and emails, like I'm getting bad at replying instantly to these things now, but it's fine for me. I'll have a select time in the morning. I'll check if my clients have messaged, if there's an update that needs to be done before their session, or I'll check in the evening, and that will be it. And I don't feel guilty for not responding. We've spoke about that in the podcast prior, haven't we? We don't feel guilty about not responding straight away to people, because it's your time and it's your day and it's your energy, and it's not good for your system to be always programmed ready to respond instantly. It's not good. It's not good. Email, WhatsApp, social media, whatever it is. And the more you can distance yourself from the need of pleasing other people or validation or trying to get somewhere, the easier it is to release from the instant gratification. And one thing still on the social media withdrawal, it's just so much nicer. You know, at first it's the initial like, oh, check social media, what's people doing, and you just realise it is a load of crap. Like, use it for the joy of connecting to people, and that's it, or the joy of getting the information, but don't put the value on it crazily.
So it's just simplifying the process again.
Simplify it, like, don't just cut it out, and it's going to be so difficult for the younger ones who are brought up with it to be programmed for constant instant gratification and constant being there for everybody, and bring on more food and more drink and more drugs and more distraction, because that's all it's gonna bring, unless this time does do that diffusing situation for everybody. Or do we just turn into the old adults and be like, oh, you're playing those video games for, and you know what we were spoke to by our parents, which was probably much easier to balance, but maybe probably played too much games when we were kids, like. But still, it's going to be worse if the whole system isn't changed. And there should be government help towards our government understanding, so people see it as a real thing, not just older people or people from our generation telling young uns not to use it that much, and to create distance and be in the real world a bit more. Because if it doesn't come from a valid source who bloody well know damn right that they shouldn't be using it this much, or we shouldn't be into the instant gratification, so we can't depend on them. It has to come from us, and it has to be widespread knowledge that get away from these issues, or understand them, or understand that the drive within yourself now. Because let's not even jump to the next generations. Right now, how are we doing? How are we feeling? More mental health issues than there's ever been for reasons like this. More loneliness in the world than there's been. Corona, more lockdown and tightness, and I'm on my own, and you know, social media has its benefits that way, but that will still breed dependence on that rather than on people being helping. Like you were talking about the mental health for the guys, you know, before we started the podcast, things like that. Great, let's go out in public and share and talk to people from a real life perspective, not dependent on the gratification or instant escape, which will only make the problem worse and create a new, cut one head off the snake, another two appear. Yeah,
that's such an important point that you made there. The whole concept of finding that balance, I know it's quite cliche when people say find a balance. How do you find a balance when the generation that you belong to, their form of balance is just more instant, and more sort of like always spending time on social media and this and that. They've never known a world which is distant from their phones. You know, when you're brought up in that environment, how do you know anything more than that? So this is why, like you said, you pointed out that you can't just be that old person or that authority figure saying stop. You know, you need to stop this and put restrictions in play, because that's never going to work. It's like what we used to do as kids. If someone suddenly says to you, you're not allowed to play on your PlayStation and stuff, or you're not allowed to go out and play in the park, you're not going to do it. You're going to rebel against it. So the way to do it is our generation, which is the bridge between the last generation, our parents' generation, and this new generation, this new half generation, because they could either be your kids, or they could either be your younger siblings. So depending on how old you are, it'll either be your younger sibling, your younger cousin, or it'll be your own child or your friend's child. So we've got to that age where now, I was just saying it to my friends who we have this Hindu group for the young kids, the adolescent kids, and they have more of a connection to my generation than they do to the next generation, which is only the next half generation, is only like 5 to 10 years older than me. So people that are in their 40s right now, they just can't connect with those people. So it's down to our generation, this generation, that are the ages of let's say about 25, 26 to about 32, 33, in that range right now. The 90s kids, the kids that grew up in that environment where we had half and half. We've seen the lifestyle that we lived when we were in our childhood, and then going into our teenagehood, to what it is right now, where now as young adults and then going into like the mature adults, we've seen technology being a part of our life, but we know how to use it sparingly, whereas these kids don't know the world beyond using it sparingly. So it's sitting them down in a way that they will actually say, I need to think about that. And I've seen these kids, like, you know, I've asked kids, what do you do for fun? Oh, I watch someone play games. I'm like, I get it. And in our generation, we were told off for sitting there and playing games. But the fact that you are watching someone playing a game, so you're not even doing the act yourself, what's the future going to be in 10 years' time? You're going to watch someone playing a game.
Man, I was reading I think it was just on YouTube on comments, people were talking about these games, or maybe it's IGN, the entertainment website. They were talking about, is it Twitch or Twitch? Twitch is like the big famous thing, right? You know, where these people are like millionaires, or they're getting thousands of dollars to play video games. And somebody was saying it's how life is. Like, how is it different from you going to watch sports and watch football players? And I can sympathise with that to a degree, but you're watching somebody play something on something else. It's pretty crazy.
Whereas when you're watching sport, you're watching someone
their physically
do the activity.
Yeah, their awareness of the skill of the intellect of how they're playing the game, or the knowledge and the free flow of movement. While you're sat in the game, it does take. You can have a broader sense of, a person playing a game has to have a certain level of cognition, and they can respond really fast, and they've got coordination.
The skill work behind it.
There's the skill to it for sure, but it's so far away from being in the world that it's not worth that level of investment, I don't think. And I've not sat to think about the ins and outs of it, or if I agree or disagree. Initially, and the reaction, I'll say, no way, I don't agree with it. I think it's unhealthy, and I think it'll be very damaging and leading us closer to the technological world, which is looking inevitable. And have you ever seen Ready Player One?
Yes.
Yeah, the VRs, people living in crappy houses and towns, but
living in this amazing world.
They're living in the amazing world because they've got the VR system. I remember once somebody had put a message on my Instagram about, it was a lucid dreaming post, and he was like, do you not, is it a fear that you'll get bored of your actual life because you'll always want to go into the dream world, which is like the best VR system there is? And I was like, you know what, I did go through a phase of that where I was like, I just wanted to get to sleep and do the lucid dreaming and, everything that goes on in there. But then I realised it's an issue with my waking life. If that's the case, something's wrong. Like, you're alive, do something with that, create a life, learn a skill. Again, the progression tree, be willing to go through the progression, because you're not getting anything otherwise. It's just the instant gratification. VR system, no, I'm a king of this land and fighting everybody and whatever. We're going into fantasy, we're not going into realism and creating it from this sense. It's what we're doing with films. Happens, film, TV shows, use them for inspiration, use them to get a feeling, go, oh, I'm inspired by that, and use it, not to continually escape to. No, because there is a difference, and it's using these things well and wisely. And I love the Star Wars movies, I watch them often, or Lord of the Rings, things like that, and they're great. But I wouldn't try and, live in that sense and just continually stay fantasy, movie, game, because it's dangerous. I remember a friend had a partner once, and his life had turned to nothing because all he would do was just play video games. And I talked to him about it. It's like, but there's nothing wrong with games. And you try and get things across like that. It's very difficult for the person to see. And to be fair, behind it in this specific case, there was a lot of issue of rejection with the world and social reluctance, and didn't feel good about himself, which was the key factor. Didn't feel good about himself. So it's building up those traits again, which aren't going to come to you. You have to be willing to go out there and to put the energy and the effort into becoming the character that you want to be in the real world, and making it from that and sharing something out. But it's a slippery slope, I think, if we just put things to the technological stance and bang on these VR headsets, and where do we go from there?
Yeah, I think going back to the analogy of watching someone play a game, if the difference between sport and that is they've also got e-sport where people pay money to go watch someone play a game, but in person. So you've got to ask the question, if you're not, would you be willing to, well, I guess the answer would be yes for a lot of these kids, would you be willing to go over, travel to that person's living room and watch him play a game? Like, when you have friends over, you tend to get bored quickly.
You're waiting for your go, right?
Exactly.
Remember when we do that as kids? You're like, come on,
if I go when's it my turn? Exactly. If you're willing to sit in the same room as that person for that same period of time that you're watching him on a screen, and you're willing to just watch him play the game, then I can say, okay, I'll hold up my hands and say, fair enough, there's something else, there's another issue that we need to deal with. But if you are just mudanely just sat there watching someone they're even watching themselves playing a game, because they just sat there watching themselves on the stream to make sure everything's fine as well, playing a game, then there's a deep issue there. I know my sister, like, when we were growing up, my little sister was always a watcher. We used to call her a watcher. We used to call her a creep, actually. So she would just watch us play the game. And I used to have that with certain games. So, like, Age of Empires, I was terrible at it, so I used to love watching my brother play it. And I would give him strategy points, even though I hated the game. I didn't know anything about him. Like, do this. But it's the fact that there is a form of gratification from, obviously, like we said, watching sport and watching these amazing people with refined skill, using it in the most challenging environment. It's amazing, right? And that's why people do it. But there has to be a part of you that wants to experience that, even a tiny portion of that glory. Almost, it is glory. And we can go back to the Mahabharata, why in that age it was all about glory. Like, people would be willing to sacrifice themselves so long as the glory was preserved and they would be remembered for their lifetimes. So going back to the character of Karna, who was the usurper brother, you know, he didn't care that he knew that he was going to eventually die, because when God or Krishna is on the other side, the opponent's side, there's no way you're going to win, you know. So he knew that he's going to die, but he said he doesn't care about his life. He just wants to make sure that people remember him and the glory for doing that. And the same as a Spartan, the glory of death. You know, we've lost that. We've lost that drive for glory. And people say, well, you know, we're not in those troubling times and glory is not the same as it used to be. Well, yeah, but I'm pretty sure we can shape it to the way it is right now. Glory doesn't have to mean you have to kill yourself for someone else. You have to sacrifice your life. It means that you do something in a way that is meaningful for you. So for us, it might be that we want to serve the world and we want to help people out. And maybe even if we help 5 people out before we die, at least that in itself is glory. You've done something amazing to serve the world. And it always does come back to that. It's selfless service. You know, I don't think I've ever heard anyone complain ever in the history. You will never read about it. Someone complaining about serving other people when it's selfless. I get it, if you're a slave and you're forced to serve someone, that's a different story. But you voluntarily serving someone for no reason apart from just serving them. If it's for the fact that it makes you feel good, then again, you're gonna hit a pitfall eventually. Yeah, for a number of years, it might serve you that it's making you feel great, but eventually, if you're not doing it purely for the act of serving, then it's going to bite you in the arse. Whether it's a tiny bite or a bigger bite, it depends on how you're doing it. But yeah, so there is no downside to serving, and that's what we're designed for. When human beings and consciousness in its essence is designed for service. We're all doing it right now. Like, the plants are exhaling oxygen. We're inhaling oxygen, we're exhaling carbon dioxide. So there's a service, there's a mutual service. The sun is serving us by providing us life. You know, the water is serving us by providing life. So the whole essence of consciousness and life is service. And if we're not participating in that, and we think, you know, we're going to check out, we're not going to serve the world, and we're just going to take everything in, it's just going to hurt us. You know, all these people, all these rich people that are always taking, it's going to play a massive toll on them, you know, and it's going to cost them their lives, or it's going to give them a very miserable existence in this life. So it's that aspect of it as well. So selfless service is maybe the answer to these issues that we're going through, but finding how each individual can serve the world or serve people around them at least. So yeah, right,
man. That's nice.
What time is it? 1:12 we've got. That's longer than we thought it was going to be. Right? Yeah, this, again, it's another one that's just a freestyle conversation. We've just kind of gone all over the place. And for me, it's going to be the joyful experience of trying to figure out the titles. Yeah, it's quite nice because I kind of figure out in the process of listening to it, because I feel like when I listen to it again, I tend to miss things that I've not thought of as we're going through it. And then it gives me a good topic to talk about. Yeah. But yeah, right. Any more last words?
All good, man. All good. It's very nice.
Perfect. So, yeah, this was podcast number 24. And as always, it's going to be on Spotify, YouTube. The preview is going to be on Instagram. When we hit 10,000 followers, we can put the entire podcast on Instagram. So help us out by subscribing to us, both on YouTube and on Instagram. So please do watch us as opposed to just listening to us. Because I think the listening viewers are going up. But not enough people are watching us. Maybe it comes down to what we were saying. People not having.
We're not appealing enough. We need to scrub up, man. Yeah. Shave that beard. I'll trim this.
Yeah, we need to scrub up. Plus, we'll have to kind of be more entertaining. So we're still thinking of doing the meditation thing, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
we'll need the space for that, won't we?
We'll need the space for that. Yeah. Things are not the best in terms of how society is at the moment. So whenever we do get the space for it,
We could just do it outside, on a nice day.
Oh,
in
yeah.
the marina.
Yeah, that'd be a good shout.
We're not going to need volume sound, are we?
No, we wouldn't need the sound, no. Yeah, we'll think about it. We'll think about how we want to do this. Plus, we need to also work our way up to it, because going into a 6-hour meditation off the bat, we're just going to be... Either we'll fall asleep or we'll just drive ourselves insane. So maybe build it up first for our own practices, maybe go up to about an hour, 2 hours, and then push it up. Maybe do a recording of doing a 3-hour meditation.
Yeah, we'll just build them in intervals, I reckon.
Yeah, and then finally get to that 6-hour and then maybe 12 hours and 24-hour mark, which will be the ultimate test.
While fasting, while in a desert, without water.
Or in the Himalayas.
In the Himalayas.
Yeah, which is what we're planning on doing. So there's that aspect. So we've got a few more projects to look forward to, right?
We do, man.
But yeah, we'll see what the future brings. Thank you so much for watching or listening, and we shall see you in the next one.
Stay conscious.